Hello, hello. Oh, you can hear me. This is very, very weird for me. If you know from my channel, I used to be a priest in my 20s. So if I get confused at any point and do something like take up a collection, just be generous, I suppose, would probably be the nice thing to do, but I'll try to remember where I am. Thank you so much all for coming. My name is Sean Tucker. I'm just going to give you a chat today, and I'm not going to really talk to you as some kind of expert photographer or master of any sort. This isn't a masterclass because I don't think I'm really there in my career yet. So a lot of you will be photographers as well, and I am fully aware that some of you will be a lot better than me, and that doesn't take away from what I want to say to you. So what I'm going to do is just share my story with photography, how I got to where I am, the kind of mess that it was, and how I'm kind of thinking about it going forwards now. So you're really catching me probably just coming out of being a baby photographer in a lot of ways. You'll see what I'm talking about, and I'm not being self-deprecating, although that would be suitably British in a Minster, but that's not what I'm doing, but it'll make sense as I go along. So if we're all on the same page with that, I'm going to see if this little button works. Please? Yes. Okay, cool. So I'm running two things, so if I get confused with this as well, like just don't call paramedics if my face goes very confused. So I'm going to give you this quote, and then I'm just going to unpack it a little bit. For those of you who follow my YouTube channel, you know I'm not going to talk about gear. I'm not going to talk about, you know, what ISO or what aperture I use on an image. You can ask me afterwards. I'm happy to tell you, but I just don't find that stuff as interesting. So this is what I'm interested in, kind of the why we take photographs. So this is by Carl Jung. He said, "One cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be of little importance in the evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening become a lie." I've done a lot of thinking over my journey, and I've had kind of a few different careers already, as you've heard, about how things progress and change as you go along. And Jung had this idea of the two halves of life. And I think that's true for our lives in general, that at some point there's a break point in the middle and things start to shift and change for us. But I think it also happens in a microcosm kind of within our careers as well. So there's a great book by a guy named Richard Rohr, which is going to come up on the screen. Oh dear. Yes, okay. The book is called Falling Upward. If you want to grab a copy on Amazon or whatever, he's a great guy to grab a hold of. Warning, he is talking in terms of spirituality a lot, but I find so much of the stuff is applicable even if you don't go to church or you're not into spirituality at all. There's so much in there that's really, really helpful. And Richard Rohr talks about these two halves of life. He kind of expands on Jung's idea this way. He says that in the first half of life, we build our boxes. And by that, he means that we decide in the first half of our life what we believe about everything. We decide, what do we believe about politics? What are my politics? What do I believe about science and the way that the world works? What do I believe about what sort of job I want, who I am as a person, where I fit in? What kind of house do I want to live in? What kind of car do I want to drive? What sort of white picket fence am I having? Who am I marrying? Who's my partner? Do I want a partner? Do I want kids? All these things, we start to construct them, and we build a philosophy of life that is supposed to answer any question we hit. This is who we are, and we kind of use that box to define us. This is who I am as a human being. This is how I'm going to interact with the world, and this is the way things will work. Then, some point in our lives, we will hit a crisis point. And that crisis point might be something like death in the family. Someone close to us dies, or we lose a job, or we break up a relationship that was really important to us. Something goes very wrong and it's very painful to us. And we try and work out, like, how does my philosophy of life that I built answer this thing? And usually it doesn't, is the truth. And we have a choice at that point. What are we going to do with the fact that now our philosophy doesn't answer that? And we have two options. The one option is that we go back into our boxes and we just reinforce that box. And we say, I don't care that this doesn't answer. I don't care it's confusing. This is what I built. We get in there and we defend it with our lives no matter what happens. If someone comes and challenges our identity, we will fight them off viciously. Or we can move through to what he calls the second half of life, which is where we just let our boxes start to fall apart. And we don't need them as much anymore because we understand the lie that they don't actually answer the questions that we know are really important now. And if you move into that stage, that kind of second half of life, you're more comfortable with paradox. You're more open to things that don't make sense. You're okay with the fact that life doesn't really fit together very neatly. And you get a weight off your shoulders because you don't have to answer everything. You don't have to define everything as aggressively. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I think that my photography journey has sort of followed this kind of line as well. I built that box very strongly. I hit that crisis point, and the things that I built didn't actually answer the questions or fulfill me or do the thing that I wanted it to do, and I had to let it fall apart, and I'm going to walk you through it. So this is some of my first half of life. Now, like everybody, I started out and I fell in love with photography quickly. What actually happened, the first time I took a photograph that I was proud of, I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. We were down at the coast in Devon, and my mom and dad had split up. I was quite a shy, introverted little boy, desperate for anyone's approval or attention or affirmation. And I had a little point and shoot camera, you know, with the zip zip wind on, you know those ones, yeah? And there was a seagull sitting on the wall, so I crept up to this seagull and I managed to get really close to it and get a shot. And when it got developed, I remember my mom looking over my shoulder at that image and saying, "That is a great photograph, you should be a photographer." Now, at that stage of my life where I needed any kind of affirmation, any kind of reinforcement, that took root somewhere deep down. I was like, ah. And then I went and became a priest. It doesn't make any sense at all, but that's what happened. And it just sort of sat there in the back of my mind. To be honest, I didn't take many photographs after that for years. But then when I worked for the church in South Africa, they didn't pay incredibly well. And I needed to do something on the side, some kind of side gig to kind of bring in a bit of money. So I started picking up cameras and doing video work and photography work for other people outside of the church. And I absolutely loved it. And I started taking stuff like this on my own. I'm showing you this. This is between us, because that's horrendous stuff, but don't tell anyone, okay? This was like, I had a Fuji Cool Pics, I think they were called, or Fine Pics. Fuji Fine Pics, that's what it was, I think. And it was like a point and shoot camera, but that was too big for a point and shoot camera to be. It was just a while ago. And it kind of had this zoom in and out function, and it was very high tech for then. And I ran around just sort of taking landscape shots or whatever I could with this. And then I went crazy in Photoshop and over-processed everything. So I went through like heavy vignettes and like sepia and cyanotype blue stuff with like fake, you can't really see it, I'm so grateful you're far away, fake like tilt shift stuff in there and duo toning. I went mad with everything, which by the way, I think every photographer when they start out should do. Everybody should overcook their photographs and get as creative and as crazy with them as possible, because it's the only way you learn. And as you do that, you make decisions for or against, mostly against, a lot of the stuff you try out, and that's how you develop a style. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I ran around everywhere and started to shoot my friends and anything I possibly could, because I realized there's something in this. I don't know what it is. And I've got a full-time job, but this is just on the side, but there's something in this that I'm really enjoying. Then I had to go out and start looking for work, because at 30, I was fired from the last church I worked for being a liberal heretic. I'm surprised I haven't burst into flames in here. It is a bit warm, isn't it? But basically the church I was working for was a very conservative church, and there were things that I was saying that I didn't agree with and told me I needed to stop saying them or I needed to leave. So it was time to go, basically. That was as simple as it was, which meant that at 30 I had a choice now, because I had put 10 years of my life into working for the church, and it had got to the stage where I couldn't continue that road for now. And I had to start from scratch at 30. And someone said to me, a friend of mine who's ever wanted to put a positive spin on things, said, the good part about that is you could choose anything you want. Like, you really worked hard to put a positive spin on the fact that my career just fell apart, but thank you. And it was obvious. That little thing from my mom back in the day, the fact that I'd been doing this on the side and I was getting really excited about it, it was time to try and make a go as a full-time photographer. And the first gig I got, first sort of paid gig I got, I remember a friend of mine in Cape Town was starting a catering business, and she wanted someone to take photos of the food she was making so she could put it on the website. So I said, I can do that, I think. Like we all do when we start, I think. And then try quickly work out how to do it online and then go. And she liked the images and she posted them and they were good. And then I went to a company named Yuppie Chef in Cape Town, where they were an e-commerce company selling very fancy kitchenware online. So the Le Creuset and all that sort of stuff. And they needed a full-time photographer and videographer. And I went with this little portfolio. And when I say portfolio, I mean one shoot. I don't mean a portfolio. I mean the only images I had to show. And they were very kind, / I don't think they knew what good photography really was. And they hired me. So I was now their full-time photographer / video guy. And so going through that was a great period of time where I went in kind of undercover as an okay photographer and slowly worked out how to do this and built my skills quietly in that little studio in the back and got myself to a stage where the stuff I was doing wasn't too horrendous. When that ended, I then came back to the UK. The reason is my job with Yuppie Chef ended. I then looked around for ages for freelance work. I thought I can now make the jump. I've got enough skills I can freelance. Unfortunately, South Africa, for those of you who don't know, has about a 40 to 45% unemployment rate, and obviously heavy affirmative action because of apartheid, which is absolutely understandable. It has to be that way. I wouldn't know how to redress the balance in that country without it, but it did mean that I walked into interviews with people who went, "Oh, sorry, you're a 30-year-old white guy, no one hires you guys," and I had to let myself out. So the fact that I loved South Africa and really enjoyed my time there was irrelevant. I needed to make a plan, so I came back to the UK and was very lucky that 3 weeks off the plane, I managed to get a job with a company, e-commerce company, who sold furniture. I won't mention the name. And again, going to an interview and them going, "Oh, you shot like big products in studios before?" Totally, of course I've done that. And then quickly running online, I can definitely do that. And going like, no one is showing me online how to do this, and trying to work it out. I knew theoretically how to do it, but I'd never physically done it. And then getting into the job and working out how to do this. And then it was a good, I would say, 4 years of very technical, very boring photography, where going into studio day after day, setting up rigs with 5, 6, 7 strobe lights, building out sets and everything else and shooting stuff, but it was very clinical, very technical, and there wasn't a lot of creativity to it. And again, like we would have to get through 50 to 100 sofas in one day. Each sofa needed 6 or 7 shots. It was just a production line. So it really didn't feed the soul on any level, but it needed to be done. But it built my studio skills quite fast because out of necessity it had to. And by the end I could actually design studios for them and I felt like I kind of knew a decent amount. On the side of this, and you can see all the time, this is me building my box, I'm building my skill sets. I'm learning kind of all the things that I need to be doing. And then on the side of this kind of work, I discovered portrait photography, which I might show you if it wants to change. No, please. Oh, there we go. So I started to do portrait photography on the side, and it was a lot of this kind of stuff. It was a lot of like, get somebody who was a model who needed shots done, and I could build a portfolio at the same time, and that kind of hustle that a lot of photographers do. And I started to sort of hone in and realize there's something in this portrait photography thing that is actually going to feed me photography-wise. Because as grateful as I was, and don't get me wrong, I was incredibly grateful that I could make money with a camera in hand, even if it was just shooting sofas. I know how lucky I was to be able to do that. There's always this other side of me going, there's something else to be built that actually feeds the artistic side of photography, and getting into portraits was the start of that. And I sort of found my passion with portrait photography. I obsessed over this stage about techniques. So for this we're looking at a period now, if I include the freelancing years to sort of where I brought you up to now, it's probably a 10-year period. I have just obsessively gone onto YouTube all the time, learning as many techniques as I possibly could. I was a massive proponent of the Brenizer method for a while. If any of you know what the Brenizer is, where you take a long focal length, shallow depth of field. I think I did one which was like 45 shots. I was just going absolutely crazy and stitched them all together so you got very wide angles, super shallow depth of field. I promise I'll put that to bed now. As many strobes as I could get in, lots of gels and ND filters. I went crazy. I researched as much as possible to find as many techniques that I could grab onto, because I thought in my head, if I know lots of techniques, I will get hired, because people will be so impressed with the sort of stuff I can do with a camera. They'll look at my images and go, how on earth did he manage to do that? We need him to get to do stuff for us because he's a wizard with a camera. That was my idea in my head. The other thing that was became an obsession, which it does for a lot of photographers, is gear. I I had that little Fuji camera. Is it? No, maybe. I had a little Fuji camera at the start. I went down to, when I started realizing I wanted to do something more professional, I went down to the local camera store in Cape Town. I bought a Canon 350D, so I'll show you how far back that is. And they didn't have a kit lens at the time. So the guy behind the counter said to me, listen, there's a second-hand 50mm 1.4 lens behind, so do you want that instead? I'm like, I don't know, do I? I don't really know what it does. Is it good? He's like, trust me, just take this. It'll change your little life. So I bought that second-hand lens off him, and I did, because it gave me that 85-ish, and it sort of gave me a bit of a shallow depth of field. That's when I started shooting my friends and people, and it sort of opened things up a little bit for me, but then it became not enough, and then I needed bigger cameras, and I got 5D Mark IIs because I wanted full frame, and then I needed something with better autofocus for video, so I got a Canon 80D, and then I got into street photography later, and I didn't want to carry those around, so I got into the whole Fuji system. It became an absolute nightmare. I think by the end I had like probably about 5 camera bodies and probably like 15 to 20 lenses, and very, very recently I have gone and got rid of everything and stripped it right back down to a couple of bodies and 4 lenses, because I realized again that I thought that the camera takes the photograph for you, which of course is ridiculous, and you are here because you already know that. But that in my head was absolutely true. If I get a fancy camera, I just point it at anything and take a shot. It's going to be brilliant. And I also thought, which I think a lot of people do, is shallow depth of field equals good photography. Like if I stick this right down, so it's like because no one's phone can do that, they'll think I'm good. And I rode that out for an embarrassingly long period of time. So that's kind of my obsession with gear and how I moved on. And tutorials, I became obsessed. Tutorial after tutorial, I spent hours and hours and hours. And this is a mixed bag for me, because I think we actually live in an amazing time. I didn't study photography. I haven't even been on any courses for like a number of days. I've done nothing like that in my career. Everything I've learned, I learned online, which is amazing that we can do that. But it can also be a deep hole where we start chasing ourselves around, because mixed in with these tutorials are also people's opinions, and it's very difficult to tell where someone's opinion and someone's actual good training comes in and out. So you start going, yeah, but this guy said this, and then this guy said this, and then you start commenting and backwards and forwards, and it gets very, very confusing. So while I'm grateful for it, it does tend to be a little confusing. And then probably, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago, I hit a crisis point. And this is where it all kind of fell apart. I've missed the slide. It said crisis, you get it. It all kind of fell apart. It was, I thought that if I have all this great gear, if I have all these amazing techniques, if I've built all this stuff, if I built this box, which is an impressive box, look at me as a photographer, there is no ways I'm not going to get hired, and no one cared. Nobody cared. No one was hiring me, because why did they need to? I mean, most people who hire you don't know what good photography is anyway. I built this thing which I was sure would impress everybody, and I would never, ever have to search for work again, and yet I seem to be searching for work more than ever. And then my crisis point was, well, that is obviously not the important stuff then. It's got nothing to do with cameras and gear and techniques and everything else. And that's when I started to move through to what is very, very recent, and this is why I'm not talking to you as an expert. You are looking at a guy who's recently made probably a very embarrassingly obvious realization that it's about a lot more than that. It's always been there in the back of my mind, but we do this, don't we? We kind of go, yeah, well, I know the important stuff about photography, now let me go out and buy a better camera. We're kind of holding both together. We know it in the back of our heads what's important, but our actions don't really show that. They show that we really think that lots of techniques and lots of gear and the rest of it are actually the important thing. A few things happened. The first thing that happened was I started to take up street photography. And this was an antidote for me. I've never done street photography really. This was an antidote for me to the day job, which was, like I said, it was studios with multiple lights and sofas and very, very technical photography that was not very interesting. So I went out and I bought the original Fuji X100, secondhand. And I absolutely love that camera. I mean, I think a lot of people who use those cameras will talk fondly of them. The autofocus was horrendous, but it didn't matter. It actually didn't matter, because the act of having to simplify, because it's now back down to, play with lots of stuff. It's just I've got dials to change my settings and use manual mode properly and just walk around and catch good light and good moments and interesting things that are going on. I had to work it backwards. And it was messy at the start, but as I did it, I refound my love for photography again, because it was a way to shoot that wasn't for anybody else. It was on my terms, and it was as simple could get, as bare bones. I could have been, shooting 50 years ago with a film camera. It made no difference. Technique or gear made no difference. It was just about the photography again. And that, as just being that antidote, helped me to realize the important stuff again and move through to kind of that second half. And I went more into portraits. Again, stripping it down. So instead of shooting in studios every time with multiple lights and 6 lights and gels and getting very complicated backgrounds, I stopped and I started to strip down. And for a long time, and now still, you'll see in a minute, I very rarely shoot a portrait with any more than 1 light anymore. And I'm doing that, 1, because I prefer it for myself, and 2, because I need to do that for a while, because I know what I was like, and I know that wasn't the way to go. And started to realize that I'm shooting a person. How ridiculous is that to say? But like shooting portraits, sometimes you shoot it because I'm creating art, man, and you forget there's a human being in front of the lens who might be feeling uncomfortable or insecure, or a personality that you need to draw out to make a better photograph as well. Because if you don't engage them or include them or draw them through, the image isn't going to be as good anyway, and who cares? So this digging deeper into portrait photography has also helped open stuff up. And starting a YouTube channel. And this was a weird one, because I put a video up, I think it was in January 2015, and this was when I was the shooting the sofas guy. That was my day job, and I thought, hang on, I went onto YouTube and I couldn't find any tutorial showing you how to shoot big products. I thought, I've nailed it, I've got it. So I'm gonna do a tutorial showing people, it's gonna get tons of views, I'm gonna be super famous, and that's what I did. I posted it, and I did a 3-part series: shoot the sofa, cut it out, drop shadow, and then recolor in fabric in the 3rd part. And it did well. It got passed around, and I just realized, like, views don't matter, because I don't care about this video. I don't care about it. I have made a mistake, and I stopped. So those 3 videos sat there from January 2015. They just sat there, and it was about, I think, would have been about May 2016 when I went on a trip to Snowdonia. And I'm not a landscape photographer, let me say it right up front, because I'm sure there are quite a few in the room. That's not my thing. I'm not a professional by any means. I kind of know the theory, but I'm very good at messing it up. But I thought, I'm going to go on a trip for a few days just to get some time away, and I'm going to try some landscape stuff, and I'll just see if I can film some stuff. And I ended up filming something that was trying to be honest about what I wasn't good at. Trying to be honest about how difficult the journey is, and how messy it is, and how uncomfortable stuff can be, but keep going anyway, and how it's all part of the process in building you as a photographer and as a human being. And that video got picked up and passed around, and I cared about it. That was the important thing. I felt like that's something I can keep doing. I mean, I without trying to knock anyone on YouTube, because I think everyone does their own thing, there are so many people, I think, who are, and this counts for photography as well as YouTube and video and everything. This counts across the board. I think there are so many people who do things like that to get famous, or to get recognized, or to get rich. And for me, I'd realized that after those first 3 videos, it is a really stupid idea to do that, because I will end up hating what I do. But if I choose to do something smaller, that's more honest, that I care about, I care a lot less who watches. I mean, I put out a video very recently about switching camera gear, and oh, the backlash. It was apocalyptic, and but it was the most amazing week for my channel ever. I had way more subscribers join that week than I've ever had before. And the message from YouTube is clear. If I want to succeed, if I want to get a ton of views and subscribers on YouTube, just talk about gear, man, because that's what will get it. But again, like, it's not a choice. It's not a choice, because I will sell out something I really am starting to care a lot about. And I will give it up for the sake of something that actually doesn't translate into anything. You know, this kind of like eyeballs on your stuff. You don't meet most of these people, you don't know them, but you have to live with the art that you're producing, and you have to be proud of it and care about it, or otherwise, why are you doing it? It can't be a portal to some kind of pseudo fame, because it's going to make you sad. Let me see if I can get this to work. And then this is the thing that is very, very recent for me. I've always had a soft spot for, or been very impressed by photographers who tell stories. And I'm going to move into a section now that's like, it's personal to me. I don't want you to think that I'm saying this is the way everyone should go as a photographer, because that's not true at all. But hopefully by sharing my story with you, you'll be able to apply it to your own life. For me, stories become very, very important. I put out a video that was challenging people to say, you know, how do you choose a direction for your photography? How do you know which way to take it? Because you get that question a lot, especially from guys starting out. And I said two things. I said, one is you pay attention to which photography you do that makes you lose track of time when you do it. When I was shooting sofas, like lunch took a long time to arrive. But when I shot portraits, it would be 2 hours and we were only supposed to shoot for half an hour. And I knew, okay, well, that's great. And the other thing was, who are your heroes? Because somewhere in the mix of who your heroes are is the direction that you want to go. It's your heart telling you, as you look at other people's work, something in that resonates with me. So when I looked at my heroes, who are people like Steve McCurry and Salgado and Jimmy Nelson, who's done amazing stuff with tribes around the world, and Joey L's stuff, who's a commercial photographer, but he's done some great personal work with the holy men on the banks of the Ganges, and he's embedded with the Kurd fighters in Syria. So there's been amazing, these people are the people who I kind of hold up and go, something about their work really, really connects with me. And in the mix there, as soon as you put it down, and do this for yourself if you haven't, by the way, as soon as you put it down on a piece of paper, the direction is very clear. I was going, I'm not really sure what I want to do, but you put it down, you go, these guys are only doing one thing. Now, admittedly, it's a terrible time to want to do that one thing, because newspapers and magazines are not hiring photographers nearly the way that they used to. So I don't know whether this is commercially viable, and I don't care. All I know is that this is the way forward for me, because this is the stuff that resonates in me somewhere and I actually care about. So I put that video out. And in the video, I also said that I know no one is coming to hire me for the work that I want to do just because I want to do it. They don't even know who I am. Why should they care? I'm going to have to go out and do that work that I connect with on my own time, on my own money, and then start to build it. And then hopefully one day it gets seen by somebody. And maybe it doesn't. But either way, even if it doesn't get seen by somebody, all I did was spend my spare time doing stuff I absolutely loved. That's the loss side of it. And that's no loss at all. So I decided to put my money where my mouth was. And in March of 2017, so you can see how recent this is. This is last year. I took a trip to, this was going to be so much more dramatic if it timed it properly, to Namibia. So Namibia for me is a very, very special place. Southwest Africa. It is it's the oldest desert in the world, and it is an incredibly beautiful, sparsely populated country. To give you an example, so the UK apparently has about 260 people for every square kilometer. Namibia has 2. That's how sparsely populated Namibia is. Beautiful natural beauty. The famous shots you will have seen from Namibia, the Instagram popular shots, shall I say, are the red dunes with the skeletal black trees in front of them. Like it's a very, very interesting place to visit. And I chose to go to Namibia because I wanted to shoot with the Himba Tribe. Because the Himba are people who I hadn't seen a lot of photography from, or a lot of really good photography from. Jimmy Nelson had done some stuff with them, which I really liked, but apart from that, there wasn't really many people who were doing it. So I went to a village named Ochikandero, and quite an interesting place. They basically want to keep their culture going in this village, but they also want to give their kids the opportunity to go to school if they choose. But keeping their culture going isn't a way to make money so they can send their kids to school. So what they do is they set up what they call living museums, where they want to live culturally the way they live, and they hook up with local people, and basically you can come and park your car, and someone will come from the village at some point at a given time, and they'll chat to you and negotiate with you. You can give them some money, and then you can go hang out in the village for a little while. And this is how they make money to send their kids to school. And they do it all on their own terms. There is no middleman or anything like that. So it works out quite well for them. And I was lucky enough from the village to have, because they knew I kind of got hold of them ahead of time, and let them know that I was coming. And Tengo Ngorera, she was my guide for the time there, and she was one of the people who chose to go to school, and she actually went to university. She has an accounting degree, but she decided to come back and wants to live in the village. And so she was great. I let her know what I wanted to do, and she said, you know, we'll tell me what time. And I was at a campsite about 1 kilometer away, and she would come and fetch me at golden hour 2 evenings in a row. And I went through to the village and shot, and that was kind of the arrangement she had, or that we had with the village. And obviously the deal was that I would take photos and then send them back. I was actually taking photos they were going to get to keep as well. Yes. The thing about the village, that what you'll notice in the pictures I've shown you is there are only women and children in the picture. The approach I took, and this is hands up, like this admission, this is me being a wimp, okay? I didn't want to get in people's faces when I didn't really understand the language and was relying on a translator. And I thought, this is the first time I'm doing this. I want to do it as respectfully as possible. So I kind of set up on the side and said, could you just let everyone know if they like photographs, they can come and get photographs. And what I'm going to do is print them and send them, which I did. I sent a bunch back. And the women and children were the ones who came. Initially, it was the women who were coming through, and they were trying to hold the children back because they were rambunctious, let's say that. And so they ended up behind me while I'm trying to shoot, and taking photos with the ladies, and just like hands, like I'm half holding my pants up while I'm trying to shoot as well, and they've got this amazing red clay which they use as well. So I've got just red handprints like everywhere, all over me. And I said to the lady, do the kids want photos as well? And she's like, yeah, of course they do. Yeah, are you fine with that? I'm like, yeah, of course. So she goes, yeah, you want? And they all just came screaming, yeah, woo, like this. And I had about 30, 40 kids in front of me, all pulling and jostling each other, yeah, like this. It was the definition of chaos. And I basically had to try and explain, like, one. We've got to do one at a time, like this. So then they got it really fast. They just pushed each other out of the way. It's my turn. And so I stood there and like showed off and mugged a bit, like, get out of the way. And then what they wanted to do is come around the back of the camera, obviously, and see the screen and have a look. But they did this thing which made my heart race a little bit, is as soon as they saw the photograph, apparently, culturally, maybe, an expression of enthusiasm is to smack the thing you're looking at. So I would show them the camera like this, and they would go, yeah, bah, like this, and then walk away. So my camera got 30 or 40 tight slaps on its screen, which I had to clean off afterwards. But they were amazing, and like the experience of it was a really incredible one. I mean, for me, as a very, very early first step to sort of going to somewhere that was different, deliberately trying to get out of my comfort zone to shoot something that was totally different. Let me skip on a little if I can. Let me tell you a little bit about them as a tribe as well, because I think you might find it interesting. So, because it's a desert culture and there's not a lot of water, they have a rule in the tribe that only the men are allowed to wash with water. But the ladies and the children, they wash with smoke, which I'd never seen before. So they will make a fire and throw on leaves which make the thing smoke, and sit in front of it and actually bathe with the smoke like this. The best, but like, and you think, oh gosh, does that make people smell? Not at all, not at all. And the best skin you've ever seen in your life. So I'm trying to work out how to start fires in my London flat so I can like do my own, I'm going to start a new therapy line of like some kind of, which is amazing. And the village is actually laid out, which is very traditional all over Africa, that you have, in the center you have a little fenced off area for the animals at night called a kraal, and then the huts are arranged around the outside, and then you have the chief's hut, and the line between the chief's hut and the gate of the kraal, which faces his hut, there is a fire, which is the sacred fire in the village. It's what I can't remember the actual Himba name for it. And they have a pretty disturbing tradition, which is that the Himba don't have the bottom 4 teeth on the bottom row here, because what they do is they take the children when they're about 4 or 5 years old in the middle of the night to the fire, and they sleep at the night with them, and then when it gets, sun starts to rise just in the morning, they pin them down with a rock and a stick and smash out the bottom 4 teeth. But it's incredible how this is a mark of being Himba and how they're incredibly, incredibly proud of it. And what was a new development was that Tengo, who you'd seen at the beginning, who was my guide, she had those bottom 4 front teeth. And she says that it's the last few generations, they've actually allowed the children to choose. Do you want to be Himba? Do you want this? And then, they wouldn't necessarily let them know what night it was happening on, which is terrifying, but they would ask them, do you want this to happen? Do you want to be part of this? And Tengo said she still gets teased and mocked that she's not proper Himba because she still has her 4 front teeth at the bottom, which personally I think is the way to go. But you know, each to their own. This is me being honest. So I went in 2 nights. The first night I went in, I set up my. I went with a Alien B800 with a Vagabond battery pack and a nice big soft lighter that I was going to use as a 1 light and balance it with strobe light. That's how I wanted to do the portraits for the whole time, and just with a 50mm lens. And I set up on the first night and I started to shoot, and I thought this strobe is really underpowered. Like, it's 800 watt seconds. Why is it so underpowered? I'm shooting, I can see it popping, but it's not really, it's just nothing at all. So I thought, okay, forget it, I'm just going to use it. And I ended up using my soft lighter basically as a big reflector on the front just to bounce sunlight back in for the whole thing. And then got back to camp that night and realized I'd left the plastic cap on the bulb. So I shot for a good hour and a half with the light popping away fiercely inside the black plastic cone inside, like it almost melted it off. But and of course I'm so excited that this is where this is what I'm doing, that stupidly I've forgotten to even take the cap off. And then, you know, this is one of the shots that ended up being natural light. So half of the trip ended up being natural light photography, you know, and then half of it was kind of strobe portraits. And then when I went back the next night, this is one of the shots I got, which was more what I wanted to try and achieve, this kind of mix of strobe and ambient light as well. This is probably one of the shots that, coming back, I was most excited about. And I thought, okay, there's something here. There's something here about a way forward. There's something in this image. There's something like that is what I was going after. And I felt like, you know, victory. Even if it's just this one shot. I mean, there are others, but even if it's just this one shot, that was definitely worth the trip, and I've learned something. So I went to June 2017, June last year. I went down to Genesis Imaging in London, who are a great outfit. I mean, they print a lot of the Magnum photographers, and I sat down with the creative director there to print out 3 big images, and this was one of them. And I thought, I'm going to show this guy this image, and he's going to be very, very impressed. Wait, watch this. And I showed him the image, and he's like, yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it's good. Well, I was like, whoa, but it's good, isn't it? Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. And he said to me, and I'm going to tell you what he said, and he didn't say this unkindly. It sounds unkind, but he didn't say it unkindly at all. He said to me, he says, this is technically a good photograph, but I don't care about it at all. Because you've gone somewhere and you've taken a photograph of somebody who is interesting on their own. You've produced something that feels very clean and technical and polished and good, but I don't care about it. It needs to be messier, have more story to it, have more soul to it. And I'm not going to pretend that wasn't a little disappointing, but it was an eye-opener. When I let that settle in, it was again, okay, I'm moving towards something. I still have no idea. I am on the right track, but I still have no idea kind of what this thing will end up looking like, because I'm making one mistake after another and slowly moving towards something. So then in December of last year, I decided to take a trip back to South Africa, and I decided to do an incredibly simple project, which was just to pick up the phone to 3 people who have been mentors to me over the years, especially back in the days when I was in the church, and to talk to them and to sit down with them and to shoot a very, very simple portrait. So I thought, clean, black background, 1 light, and just sit and talk to them for 10 minutes and get out of there after 10 minutes. Don't try and push it, don't try and make it into a shoot. Shoot it and leave. And hopefully the story I have with this individual already, and thinking about them and talking to them as we go, produces something different. And the images I produced there felt different to me somehow. Different to what I did with the Himba. And I'm not saying, by the way, that those images are bad, or people who shoot like that, there's anything wrong with it, but something for me needed to go a little bit further, which was actually a lot simpler. This is a guy named John, who was definitely a father figure for me growing up. Another guy named Vic, who was one of my lecturers at seminary. And then this is a guy named Sergio, who I went to kind of extensive counseling with for about 6 months after leaving the church, and sat and talked through stuff, and was a guy who really kind of got me through a rough patch. Something about these images felt different. I would say that it's harder technically to get the Himba style images, but this is the way I want to go. Less is more, making sure that I'm I'm focusing on less about what camera I'm using, what settings I'm using, what lights I'm using, and focusing more on what I want to say. Who are these people? How can I feature them? What is the story that I need to tell, whether it's on the street or whether it's shooting portraits. So for me, going forwards, oh gosh, simplify is the biggest one. I want to strip everything back, like past technique and technology, and I want to just get to the image as simply as possible, which is going to mean things like less techniques and more story. And understand when I say story, I know a lot of people say to me, yeah, but do my images have to have a story? No, they don't. That's a personal thing for me. That's something I want. If you are somebody who's a landscape photographer, story may be less your concern, but what is your thing? If I'm less technique, more story, what is yours? If you take technique out and focus on something else that's more evocative about the image, what is that thing? For me, it just happens to be less gear and more experiences. I've made a decision for myself that I am not going to spend money anymore on big fancy cameras. I'm done. I'm done. I'm not. I walked down to Wex in London recently with, I'm not joking, 3 or 4 bags worth of camera gear that I handed over, and I walked out with 1 bag of stuff that I know I need and can do everything with, that fits in 1 backpack now, and I'm done, because I would rather spend money on experiences, on going places, on seeing things, on putting better subjects in front of my camera than obsessing about what I'm using to capture that subject. That's now more important for me if I'm going to move forward the way that I'm saying. And less YouTube, and I know this is something people on YouTube shouldn't say, less YouTube and more books, because I know that it's great that we can sit on YouTube and we can watch tutorials and we can learn stuff that we need to know, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we should all do that, and we're very lucky that that's available. But I would rather spend more time now reading books that change me as a human being, that mean that I have more things to say that matter. Because I really, really believe that the art that we produce, no matter who we are, where we are, what we do, comes directly out of who we are as human beings. So it's a big mistake, I think, for us to run around trying to obsess about, you know, subjects and everything else we're taking, and neglecting who we are and building ourselves as human beings, because we all have a point of view. And I hope that as I dig deeper with myself and learn who I am and what I actually have to offer, it means that that comes through in the images and tells better stories as well, almost working from the inside out rather than from the latest fancy camera technology to Photoshop, if you know what I mean. Because I think that's a part that a lot of us can neglect because it's so easy to neglect. And then less of me and more of others. And I mean by that I never want to be some kind of celebrity photographer, and I'm not. I mean, I'm not. There's no image that I've taken that will survive after I die. I know that. If I die tomorrow, there is no image of mine that's going in an art gallery. There is no image of mine that is going in photo books or being talked about. And I'm okay with that, because I know that people who become masters in photography, who actually have a point of view and a legacy and things that they said, it took them a very, very long time to get there. And I'm in for the long haul, and that's okay. But that does mean as well that it becomes less about, you know, me trying to show off about who I am or what I can do, which isn't actually that impressive. We all fake it with each other that we're geniuses, but we're all just muddling along, really. And more about what am I actually showcasing? Who am I sort of putting in front of other people? I'm going to just blast through a few people who kind of impress me with this kind of thing. And this is somebody who, embarrassingly, I only found recently, is Tish Murtha. And her images, and she did a series in, I think, 79, 80, 81-ish, up in Newcastle upon Tyne, which has just recently been published in a book by a daughter called Youth Unemployment. And these images, like, really speak to me, because I mean, they're showing a time and a place. They're showing something that's real, something that was happening, people that were experiencing something. And they really are quite profound. I mean, that one, eh? It's just stunning. Another photographer who's an obvious one, as I said earlier, Salgado, who's a Brazilian-born photographer. He said this, he said, "I'm not an artist. An artist makes an object. Me, it's not an object. I work in history. I'm a storyteller. I'm not imposing that on you in your photography, and I understand that's personal to me because story is something I've picked up that I know I need to move towards. But did incredible work with refugees around the world. and different cultures. And the Workers series he did was, and the thing about it is, who cares what camera that was taken on? That actually could have been taken on a phone. It doesn't matter. It's that he was there and he told us a story and he brought us back a point of view. He said, I don't want anyone to appreciate the light or the palette of tones. I want my pictures to inform, to provoke discussion, and to raise money, to be something that actually makes a tangible difference in people's lives, because it's designed for that. It's meant to tell people stories so they change. And then his Genesis series, obviously, which has got a lot to say about the different things we're doing to our world. Don McCullum, who's also someone who really kind of hits for me, who is someone who grew up in Finsbury Park in North London and shot the streets around him, and then ended up being a journalist and going to places like Belfast and around the world shooting conflict photography and bringing us back a very, very powerful point of view. And he said, and I love this quote, that photography is the truth if it's handled by a truthful person. And that really just drives home that it has to start with what we do with ourselves first, because it has to come out of who we are. It can't just be, that we've got a fancy camera. So what about you? What about what you do? And I hope this has given you some things to think about what are actually the important things. Let me say that up front, there's two sides to this, because I understand that photography is often a business for us, okay? And it was for me as well. I shot, like I told you, I shot products in studios all day, and I was incredibly grateful that I could do that I could pay the bills with a camera in hand. And I didn't mind that it was mundane work. I learned a lot through it, and I was happy to do it, and lots of jobs are mundane, but this was photography mundane. That's definitely a step up. So I was happy doing that. But there was always this thing in the back of my head that aside from business, aside from the fact that I want to make money doing this and pay the bills, what could I make photography be that says something more or does something more for me? And that's been something that's kind of haunted me ever since. And I've done a lot of thinking about legacy. Like, what do I want to leave behind? I turned 40 this week. And it's at that stage, I think you start questioning things. Am I on the right track? And thinking, okay, there's nothing yet that's going to be remembered, but maybe in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, maybe I keep one step at a time moving towards something that is worth saying something about, maybe. And that's only a maybe, but it was worth trying even if it doesn't work out. These are questions that I think are worth asking. What do you see which you're in a unique position to show us? Where you are. What could you show us about the world you see, wherever you happen to be? What story have you lived, and how has it shaped the way you see the world? We forget that, don't we? Like a lot of who we are or the difficulties we have coming up, they shape how you see people and how you see yourself and how you see society and how it's structured and how you see things like justice and how people are treated. All those kind of things are buried deep down inside wherever you happen to be. Could you show us that? Could you show us some of that in your photography? Is there something that you could bring through? Do you have rare access to stories which need telling in your life? And it might be small. Don't think you have to run off to war. I'm not about to go to war. I'm a chicken. What could you tell us where you are? Like, where you have rare access to a story that needs to be told, no matter how small that might be. That might be a way that you could start to make photography be something more than just a day job on the side of what you're doing. I mean, I think some jobs you get very lucky. I think wedding photographers, for example, you have the potential to combine this and turn what you do into an art form. Some people absolutely love weddings, and they love shooting weddings, and they love telling those stories, and it really, really fulfills them. I'm very jealous. I think that's amazing. Some journalists get to do that. They get to tell the stories that they really want to tell and use their art to do that, and I think that's incredible. Some photographers have to split it because they know that the day-to-day photography is not that, but they can still pursue that on the side, and that's kind of where my journey's taken me. And what do you care about? And believe needs more attention, because maybe you could help give it to us. I'm going to end on this quote. Very suitable, seeing as we're in church. This is a quote by a guy named Frederick Buechner, who is a fantastic author and somebody who's really challenged me over the years. And the religious stuff aside, just listen to what he says. The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger collide. I love that, because, just putting us in the picture of saying that who we are and the things that we love, and for me that is photography and it is filmmaking. I really, really get a kick out of that. Is there a way to point that in my own time or as part of my job or however towards something in the world that's hungry or missing or broken or needs fixing? Is there a way to bend it towards that? And I think if I hit that sweet spot, for me, that's where calling comes in, and that's where I found where it's really going to work out. Oof, I nailed timing. Huh? So what we're going to do, because I think it would be a little bit hectic to try and do a Q&A in here, because we'd be kind of yelling over each other. But what we're going to do now is we're going to head back over. If you're interested in sort of hanging around and chatting and doing a bit of a Q&A, in the Princess Key Shopping Centre there's that centre court with the stage in the middle. If you would like to come back and we can do some Q&A and have a chat or whatever, we're going to make our way over there right now, and we will do that. But thank you very, very much for listening. I appreciate you making your way through today. God bless. Is that perfect?